My parents they were not born in America. My mom is from Quebec, and my dad was from New Zealand. And I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, which is like famous for being one of the richest towns in America, mostly because of finance. But my parents weren't in finance, and it was just a weird world to kind of grow up in, because we kind of like I'm white. My parents are white. So like you kind of like on the surface, you're like, okay, you could fit in Greenwich, Connecticut. But in some ways, my parents and my family didn't quite fit in. I'm not complaining at all about my upbringing, but because they were immigrants, they weren't born in America, and they didn't work in the industry, in kind of an industry town. Greenwich is kind of an industry town for finance. And so I had a weird upbringing in a whole bunch of different ways. My dad was an entrepreneur. My home was pretty chaotic. I mean, I love my parents to death. They gave me so much, but it was a wild upbringing. What did I want to do? I don't even know. My mom from a very early age like told me that I wanted to be president of the United States. She's like, yes, you want to be president. And so I'm really thankful to my mom for instilling me with a lot of confidence. But I just knew I didn't necessarily want to be president, but I knew that I wanted to be different. And I knew, or maybe I was like brainwashed or something into thinking that I needed to be great. And that's just the honest, weird truth about my upbringing.
You know, what I find really, I got to say, charming about you, or appealing, both in the other interviews you've done, and this documentary that we're going to talk about, which is about Amazon. You're in there with I believe it's a shirt made out of the Texas flag. You are a kind of one of a kind American guy, and I sort of have the feeling that you don't sugarcoat anything. You say what's on your mind, and you're very direct. And I think you almost have like the perfect personality type in my mind to be like an entrepreneur, to get shit done. So,
I still sugarcoat a little bit, but my natural proclivity is to just be direct, drop F-bombs. Let's effing go. And by nature, I am extremely like driving. And I mean, you said I was charming. I don't deserve that. I'm intense, and I can be really difficult to be around, because if I'm my like normal self, I'm just like I'm like a live wire. I just want to do a million things at the same time at really high speed. And so, yeah. And then, I'm meant to be some sort of like weird person. I got fired from my first job out of school. I wasn't meant to be an employee. I'm meant to do something different. And
yeah, I didn't mean to say you're charming like the way that like your VP of sales would be charming.
I'm not that.
No, not at all. But I meant that I'm charmed by you because you're like a certain type. It's a certain American entrepreneur type. At least that's how it comes across to me in these other media. So anyway, so I was really looking forward to talking to you. So you and I interacted over Twitter about IQ or something a long time ago. And so let's just get that out of the way, because I think it seemed like we disagreed, but it seems like in Twitter, it's very easy to like disagree without really like actually disagreeing. So
yeah, anyway. I'm a natural contrarian. So I'll like just stir up, bleep on Twitter when I probably shouldn't be doing so. So, I mean, I don't totally know what your position is on IQ, to be fair, but my position on IQ is that one, I think it's overrated. And then two, I think that IQ tests don't capture a lot of human intelligence. And I can give some examples of that. And also, one of the areas that I draw that conclusion from is that I use cognitive tests before I hire people. And so I see these people who don't necessarily perform well on the cognitive test, but then end up performing like very well on their job. And it's not necessarily just like a bad job where they're just, not a bad job, but a simple job where their job is to just take a plush animal and put it in a box repeatedly. Like some of these people have like high powered thinking jobs and they don't do well on their IQ test, but they they're actually really good at their job. And so that's why I think it's overrated. It doesn't capture everything there is to human intelligence.
Yeah, so I have to say I don't really disagree with you. So first of all, in the literature, like if you look in the like either psychology researchers or often researchers who are in like actually business schools who study personnel selection, it's only a statistical predictor. So in other words, on average, if you were hiring 1,000 employees and you hired the ones with the higher scores, you would on average have better outcomes, but the variance is huge, right? So we all know people that score well on a test, and then when you actually ask them to do something in the real world, they're not very effective. And so there's no like tight correlation between someone's IQ score and how they're going to perform, even in a job, which I think you were trying to say involves some cognitive, load, like not just like moving items around, but they have to think about stuff. And we'll get into this later that I think you pointed out that like running an Amazon business now is like doing multivariable optimization at all times or something like this. And so anyway, I don't think you can judge individuals very well just by their IQ score. I think there's other factors as well. Drive, motivation, all kinds of things, curiosity. None of those things are measured well by an IQ test. So in some very weird areas, like, say I'm trying to pick a kid who's going to do a PhD in electrical engineering or theoretical physics. If they're below a certain level on the test, I would say like, well, maybe they had a bad day when they took that test, or maybe they're going to have a very difficult time with this material. And I think I feel pretty confident about that. Like below some threshold, people, generally going to have trouble with like the most abstract cognitive stuff. So that's about as far as I would go. Now, if you're selecting the freshman class at Berkeley,
right,
and you can pick any kid you want, and there's a difference between picking the high SAT kids and just randomly picking kids, I think demonstrably there's a big difference. Like in the last few years, college education, now we see like very large data sets where you can see the difference between those two algorithms for picking a freshman class. And in terms of how they perform later in the major, like what grade point average they get or what the chances are that they drop out, there are pretty significant statistical differences. But it doesn't mean any particular individual, at low SAT, you're definitely going to fail out. High SAT, you're definitely going to succeed. None of that is true for an individual.
So what I find interesting, you brought up drive and motivation. So those are huge in terms of entrepreneurship. But I feel like there are also some other things that aren't captured that are really important. Like, so if someone has Asperger's, for example, like stereotypically, they might be able to do pretty well on an IQ test, but they can't conceptualize what another person is thinking. And that's like essential for success in life. As far as I know, that's not really captured anywhere on the IQ test.
I agree with you. Like you could be, in fact, there are a lot of people who are this type.
Yes,
they score
exactly.
really high on an abstract test, but they have no theory of mind. They don't have a good theory of mind for what the other guy is thinking. Yep. And maybe they don't have good diplomatic skills, or they can't get the other person to like them, which is like most salespeople have to be really good at that.
Right.
So obviously there's a huge range of different capabilities people have. The issue is that it's somewhat harder to cheat on an IQ test than some of the other cognitive measurements. Like if I try to measure whether you're a outgoing person and I just give you a survey, you could just like, let me imagine I'm actually my brother who is outgoing. How would my brother answer these questions?
Right.
And that so like you could get a very unreliable measurement from that test. Whereas people who do score high on an IQ test, usually they do have some, particular cognitive ability. So the other things are real. It's just harder to measure them, I think.
Yeah, I totally. I mean, something that always comes to my mind that blows my mind actually is athletics. Okay. So we typically think of that as contrary to the opposite to IQ in a way, like, jock versus nerd. But like, imagine how powerful your brain needs to be to not only know where the other basketball players are on the court, but to control your body such that you can execute all the moves on the court. And then like one step further, something that really blows my mind is like, have you ever watched like Steph Curry or LeBron James give like a post-game interview? Yep. And someone will be like, oh yeah, at minute 37, what did you think about when that guy like took a three and you were over there? And the guy will just be able to recall from memory, like he's playing a movie, exactly what happened in minute 37.
Yeah.
Now I watched the game and I can't recall it. And when I play basketball, I can't recall every minute of it. And I was like, that is some sort of intelligence that I don't know. It's probably correlated with with part of the IQ test, but it's not fully captured. And typically we don't think of basketball players, even the best ones, who almost certainly do have pretty high IQs. We don't think of them as generally high IQ individuals, but there's something else there that's not being captured. And that's just how I feel about IQ.
I agree with that too. I mean, obviously there's some people who have a much better sense of what's happening on the field than other people. And sometimes you can have like a slow, not very, explosive linebacker, but he just has a good feel for where everybody is and he knows where he's supposed to be on the field to make the tackle. And yeah, it's very hard to measure that. I guess the only way to measure that really is look at film of them when they were in college or something like that. So I don't know that there's a pencil and paper test that can actually, predict that capability.
All right. So we agree.
I don't think we really disagree very much. Yeah. So anyway, let's go back to, let's see. So just to introduce you to the audience. So as I understand it from another interview that you had, after college, this job didn't go well for you, whatever your first job was. You talked, I don't know if it was your uncle or it was some billionaire friend of the family, and you wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so you went to China basically without any Chinese language skills. You had a very long flight and you were sleep deprived. And somehow you managed to get all the way to, was it Liaoning? Somewhere in the far north. And you actually basically worked out a relationship, I think, with a local factory to make whatever product that you wanted to sell. And subsequently you were in and out of China for maybe like an entire decade. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It wasn't an uncle. Unfortunately, I don't have a rich billionaire uncle. But it was the richest person I knew. I wanted to make something in China, and I was like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know anyone who knows how to do this. Maybe the richest guy I know knows how to do it. And he basically sat me down and he was like, Molson, the Chinese like face to face. You should go to China.
Yeah.
And so I ended up actually, as you said, in Liaoning province on the border of North Korea, of all places, because the product that I wanted to make at that time was, it turns out that the factory cluster, one of them, was on the border with North Korea. So unfortunately, I'm not a spy, not a CIA agent, but here I am in the middle of China with no language skills, no knowledge of the culture, no support system. I kind of just airdropped myself there. And it was a brutal experience, but like, I'm so thankful I had it. I learned so much. It was awesome.
It's ballsy. I think like from one entrepreneur to another, you have to be willing to do like almost anything actually to make your company succeed. I mean, you have to be very, very determined and willing to suffer. In Chinese, they would say, eat bitterness, 吃苦.
Yeah, it's not only that though. Like you have to be. What you said is totally right. Like I don't think it depends on what type of entrepreneurship you want to engage in. Do you want to be a CPA with your own accounting firm? Then you probably don't need to be airdropped into like on the border with North Korea and deal with that crazy situation. But if you want to if you want to take your company to IPO or something like that, you have to be willing to do kind of like weird, crazy stuff like that. And it's not just a question of being able to eat bitter, as the Chinese say. It's also like you have to be willing to do something weird that everyone else looks at and they're like, why would you ever do that?
Yeah, you put your finger on it. A big part of it, and this is talked about kind of explicitly in some Silicon Valley circles, is that you have to be able to reason on your own and come to a conclusion which might be radically at odds with what everybody else is thinking, but stick to your guns, and maybe for a long time. And I think that's a very common trait that successful entrepreneurs have.
Yeah, you have to be contrarian and right. If you're conformist and right, then the opportunity has already been taken. If you're contrarian and wrong, then you're not going to make any money. So you have to be contrarian and right in order to see a market opportunity that no one else sees. Or, you just keep hacking away at it. You just like pound sand until it becomes glass, because so it becomes something like that. You just have to be a weirdo. And I think it's important to say that because there's a lot of people who like aspire to be entrepreneurs, but like you kind of really need to know what that's all about.
I agree. I teach a class on this for like graduate students mostly in STEM at Michigan State. And I always emphasize to this, it's going to really hurt, because you're going to be going against the grain, and you better be ready for that. You better be willing to stick to your guns. Otherwise there's no hope. So as somebody who has been going to China since probably the early 2010s, is that right?
Yeah. The first time I went was, I think, 2011.
Yeah. So you've seen so that's 13, 14 years. You've seen dramatic changes. So I've also been traveling to China for, a bit longer than that. But I think it's hard to convey to Americans now how radically changed, even in one decade, the situation there has changed. And I think in your most recent video, and I'm very jealous of you because I think I haven't been there since 2019, pre-COVID.
Oh, you gotta go.
Yeah, and I think you had been there since 2019, right? And
right.
So now what struck people, among the things that struck people in that video, we'll post a link to all this stuff in the show notes, is you were saying even in the last 5 years, things have changed dramatically. So maybe talk about that.
Yeah. So I think the average American who doesn't go to China, who probably gets their information about China from like traditional media, their concept of like China's change is like some combination of like that quintessential classic photo of like Pudong Peninsula in Shanghai, where they like show like a grassy knoll in 1980. And then in like the year 2005, there were like a lot of buildings there. And that, and then the other general idea that's kind of associated with that is like the ghost city. So like China's just building these buildings all over the place and they're empty and they're facing some sort of demographic collapse. So China changed in that way, right? In a very, no pun intended, concrete way. Like they threw up buildings all over the place and they built a lot of roads and they built a lot of high-speed rail, which is fantastic. It's like awesome to ride high-speed rail and people really use it. Like it's not just some sort of like fake thing that's all government subsidies. So there's that, right? But then the change that I saw in the last like 5 years, the thing that like blew my mind in particular was like kind of the change in the culture, but like there was a great deal more automation and technology everywhere. It felt like I was stepping into the future, but the cultural change, that is what for me in particular blew my mind.
So just to elaborate on that, like a lot of people who have been to Asia, they would say, like, say they go to Tokyo, and Japan has been a developed country for a long time. It caught up with the West quite early, and Japanese are very polite. Everything is very orderly. It's clean. Everything works. Maybe you could also compare to Singapore, maybe a little bit like that. But in China, it's possible to see all kinds of chaotic, crazy shit happening. Guys with their shirts pulled up, because like you can body sweating through your tummy and stuff like this in the summertime. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. Now, interestingly, I'm curious what I'll think when I go there, because a lot of times when I go, I'm with like people who are tech entrepreneurs, university professors, scientists, kind of medium high government officials. So those people were always pretty well behaved and cultured. But then like maybe like if I talk to a cab driver or I'm just talking to some vendor on the street, I'll notice some qualitative difference from 5 years ago. But I think my exposure is a little bit biased toward people who kind of have been civilized for some period of time.
Yeah, for sure. Like, hey, I'm traveling to America for the first time and I go to Mississippi. Or, hey, I'm traveling to America for the first time and I go to Manhattan, or I go to Aspen. Like, those are three totally different Americas in a sense. And China is a huge country. And so it's the same way. If I go to like rural Henan province or or if I go to Shanghai, and it also depends on who I'm hanging out with. But to kind of like address what you're saying, like go to the train station. And when you go to the train station, you're going to see everyone from the tech entrepreneur to the professor, because they ride high-speed rail too, to, you know, like someone who's got their life's belongings on their back. And they're going from one part of China to another part of China, and watch how they like line up in a line and see how that's changed over the years. And like, did someone step on your foot? Did someone like roll over your feet with their suitcase, which used to happen like continuously and bump into you, but it didn't really happen that many times this time. And you're like, what's going on here? Like, why did no one spit right on my foot? Or, I mean, these are like but like that was the reality of China. Like for me 10 years ago, it was just like wild. It was like a huge cultural shock. You know, I was on a sleeper train from like Beijing to this random part of China. And like, you know, people were like touching me, like my hair, just like grabbing. They had never really spoken to anyone like me before. And it's like, it seemed like there was less of that. And, you know, you brought up Japan, and like, like China, particularly in Shanghai, right? Again, like if you go into like rural China, it's different, but in Shanghai felt like I was in like kind of like a weird Chinese clone kind of Japan.
Yeah. What you said really struck me, because when I was last in China, I was in Beijing in summer of 2019. And maybe, again, we were staying at this residence for foreign scientists or scholars at Beijing University. So it was pretty, you know, not upscale, but pretty civilized place. And I went to a lot of places and I took photos. I think they're on my blog, but I went to places which were very aesthetically, you know, very nice cafes, very nice museums, and, you know, various places where I thought like, wow, this city is getting to be a little bit like Tokyo in the sense that it's pretty developed and nice. And, you know, so I was already getting kind of a sense of that in 2019, but it was probably a selected, you know, set of environments that I was exposed to.
Well, now you got to go back, because it sounds like you were traveling to China like somewhat regularly, maybe like
I was.
Like every year or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so
or
now you're
more.
Right, or maybe more. So you were seeing like, okay, this is 6 months of change. This is one year's worth of change. But now you're going to get 5 years in one shot, and like the whole post-lockdown thing, and all the COVID and all this stuff. And it hit me like, I was like, it blew my mind like completely. And like, I kind of just want to go back. I want to see it again. I want to go somewhere else.
I want to go this summer. It's just I got to get the scheduling right, and I have to go back and get a visa, which is always a pain in the ass. So
so bad. Yeah. My 10-year hadn't expired.
I never got one, so I have to go back to the consulate and get the visa. So
that's annoying. In Detroit, you're in Michigan.
Well, I think Chicago. I think I'll do it when I'm in the Bay Area. I'm in the Bay Area soon for a bunch of meetings, so I'll maybe try to do it in San Francisco.
Maybe they're gonna just like give you. I actually think that they've loosened visa requirements for all sorts of different countries, and I think they should open it up to Americans. They really should. That would be
they totally
power coup for them.
You know, they totally should. It would be a soft power coup, as you say, and because, you know, like if you're French or German, probably right now you can just fly there with no visa. The thing is, like there always was this kind of tit for tat thing, because for, you know, America's very restrictive on people coming here from China, and I think the government was just like tit for tat. But you're right, for soft power reasons, they should just let Americans travel there. It's I mean, for just plain old tourism, it's a great place to go. Actually, there's so many
their economy, you know, like it would help. Like Shanghai in particular. I mean, Shanghai had. I don't know. Shanghai is like a huge diversified economy, but I imagine that some percentage of it was tourism. Yeah. And that is not where it was, not even close.
Yeah. So now when you go, are you usually visiting factories for your business?
Yeah, that was like usually to start, I was just like learning, and I had an office over there and doing all sorts of weird stuff like that. But yeah, so when I went most recently, I visited like logistics and warehousing for our business. And then I visited our suppliers. And then I used to always go to a trade show, because you go to a trade show, it's not as good as individually visiting the factories, because it's quite important to visit your factories. But trade show was cool because you would hit a lot of birds with one stone, because sometimes you'd find, because your suppliers, more than one, would just be at the trade show in Canton Fair, and you do dinner with this guy, do dinner with that guy, and it was very convenient. Yeah. I've been to China, like, sorry, this is a ridiculous statistic. It gives you a sense of how I did China. I think I've been there like 10, 11 times. Never been to the Great Wall.
Oh, well, you should probably go. It's not far from Beijing. So
yeah, I don't know.
But yeah. So just for the audience, some of the favorite, I like your stuff on YouTube, but I saw some videos on YouTube of people who were teaching entrepreneurs in the US who wanted to start like a clothing brand, how to go to certain trade shows in China and basically line up extremely low cost, high quality textile manufacturing. And like you could go to some guy who makes like the really high end stuff for, who knows, Ralph Lauren or something, and just basically order like from that same guy, like something with your logo on it or your design. And it's kind of amazing what's possible if you actually just go there and try to do it.
Yes. Yeah. I've seen those videos as well. I think I know some of the guys who make those videos actually through Twitter. Yeah, it's totally true. Like if you want to make physical products, like you just need to go, just do it. Just go. I think a lot about where the next Elon Musk will come from. And I'm not sure the next Elon Musk will be Chinese. I have no idea. Next Elon Musk could be African, it could be Indian, could be American. But like the next Elon Musk might not be Chinese, but if they want to get stuff done, they might need to speak it. I'm serious. Like you just go over there.
Well, I don't think Tesla could succeed without that Shanghai Gigafactory. I think it's pretty central to their success. So
I think it's exporting like a ton. He oftentimes alludes to how it's the highest efficiency operation of the 4 factories he has, 1 in Germany, 1 in China, 2 in the US. I could be wrong, but that's roughly right. Yep. Yeah.
Can I ask you, so your core business, it's a toy, you sell toys that mostly are made in China and you sell them in the US. When you go there to look at the factories or the distribution, like, is it high tech? Like, is it still like, I don't want to say sweatshop labor, but is it still that kind of labor there, or is it automated? Like, or maybe the logistics supply chain is automated. What's the difference between now and like 5 years ago for your business?
Sure. So I think like 50% of our production is in China. So the other 50% is actually in Indonesia and Vietnam. Well, okay. So what you're saying is like highly factory and product dependent. So we make an educational toy. It's a building toy called Brain Flakes, and that's injection molded. And so there's a machine that kind of injects plastic into a mold, and Brain Flakes discs come out. And that is pretty automated outside of the packaging. But when it comes to making plush animals, which is something else we sell, no one has really figured out a way to automate that, like anywhere. Okay, it's just too hard. It's just like you need like image recognition, you need like amazing manual dexterity, maybe something else that's not on an IQ test, and you have to have a sense of touch, which is a huge thing. That people don't understand this, but like robots, like they can like usually like find where something is and they can grab it, but oftentimes like if a robot claw is trying to pick up an egg, like it'll crush the egg. It doesn't always know if the egg is in its hand, and so humans have touch. So plush animals, as you can imagine, not so much in China. It's more in Vietnam and Indonesia, but we do have a plush animal factory there. I only really got to visit 2 of my suppliers this trip, maybe 3 of my suppliers. And, it was automated, and I saw like more robot arms picking plastic parts out of the machines. And I saw another factory that had like a decent amount of robotics with a conveyor belt system. And I'd never really seen that before. But the other like major technological change isn't just like robotics and automation. It was the disintermediation. So like almost all the factories I went to were selling directly to consumers out of the factory door, right? So no middleman. So factory making products and then like shipping it directly on China's Amazon or China's Shopify, whatever you want to call it. And that was another big change. It was tech, but not necessarily like what we think of in terms of like robotics and automation.
Yeah, just to clarify that for the audience. So one of the things that's happened in China is, more advanced e-commerce where the factory owner can directly sell on these platforms. And I guess maybe Temu or some of these things are in a way like for them to try to do that in the United States. Like, I don't know if it's actually factories directly that are getting on Temu to sell here, but anyway, in China, like it is possible for the factory owner to not go through a middleman in distribution.
Yes, that's right. And so, yeah, to answer your question, there are Chinese factories that are selling directly to American consumers, predominantly through Amazon, but also through like AliExpress. Temu's not like this kind of like weird model where they do it as well, but Temu kind of has a hand in it, kind of in a traditional retail way. And so the reason why this is such a big deal is because like once upon a time, you had a factory in America that would sell to a distributor, and then the distributor would sell to a store, and then the store would sell to a person. And then you had a Chinese factory that would work through an agent, that would work through a distributor, that would go to a store to a person. But now it's just the Chinese factory that is selling directly to you, the American consumer, through a American marketplace, or sometimes through a Chinese marketplace, through Temu or TikTok, right? And that's a sea change.
I had a question. I hope I'm not derailing you further, but the stuff that you're selling though, couldn't that move all the way out of China? Like, couldn't that all be made in Indonesia and Vietnam now? It's not really hot. Would you consider that advanced manufacturing to make that stuff, or
it's product by product dependent, right? And so just because the labor is there, right? You still need like a high functioning port. You still need great roads, and the roads in Vietnam and Indonesia are not great, and the ports do not run at the same efficiency. And then also you need availability of raw materials, and also brain flakes. Maybe that was what you were thinking of. It's like, yeah, you can make that almost anywhere in the world, even if there isn't availability of like the plastic pellets that are melted down. But for something like stuffed animals, the supply chain is essential because you need like hundreds, maybe thousands of different fabrics. And they're like, hey, every plush animal has like a nose. It's got eyes. If they're not embroidered, you need the right thread and like a cloth label and all these different things. And so there needs to be a local supply chain. And it turns out that China is just, the supply chain in China is the best in the world for almost everything, if not everything. And so it's not trivial to just be like, yeah, here's an injection molding machine, like go melt that plastic and bada bing, bada boom, and you're good. You can do it in Indonesia.
Is there some city in Zhejiang that like just makes plush animals or something? Or
there's a city in China that is like, there are like multiple cities in China that specialize in plush animals, like one for the domestic market. Like they're actually, it's even like there's like a city that like dedicates itself to like really large plush bears, and then there's like a city for like domestic.
Yeah.
The driven plush. And then there's like a city for export plush. And to your point, like all the guys who make the eyes and the noses are all in the city. So it's like down the street and there's this like cluster of efficiency that goes on there. And that's one of the reasons why China beats all these other countries on price, even when the labor rates are higher in China.
So for a guy like Molson Hart, Ivy League, math, econ, double major,
1400 SAT holder.
Which is good.
700 writing.
I mean, that's got to be like 98th or 99th percentile or so. Anyway, but what's your comparative advantage when it comes to plush animals? What's special? Why are you dominating, crushing it in plush animals?
No one knows. It's actually like a highly fascinating business question. Like it shouldn't be
It's exactly what I was asking, because you would think that it's like it's going to be driven to the bottom, like because like lots of people can, point at the plush animal and say that one's going to sell, or maybe not. Maybe they can't.
Yeah, we even compete against the factories. We do. We compete against the factories and we win. Why do we win? There's still a culture, especially amongst the factories and the old school factories, of like not understanding the importance of quality. There's a culture of again, this is amongst the older generation in China in particular, like not having long-term thinking. So like our quality is better, and then we're super scaled up. So like, yeah, we don't have a factory in China. We don't have a factory in Indonesia, but the Chinese factory doesn't have its own warehouse in the United States. And we're not buying plush animals unless we can buy a 40-foot high cube container. And so we're buying those in large quantities, and then we're negotiating our shipping rates down as much as we can. So we make high quality products, and we're sticklers for the quality. And we have there's amazing design talent in my company. Like the head designer, like we had not a manatee. It wasn't great looking. I swear to God, that manatee now, it's the most beautiful plush manatee that's ever been created. And I'm not just saying that as a salesperson, because we already established that I'm not likable, but or even persuasive. But like, it really is beautiful, and I don't know. That's unique, and having some knowledge of how the U.S. system works and how Amazon works, and then also we can sell to stores, which the Chinese factories aren't so able to do through Amazon. We have a whole bunch of different competitive advantages that you wouldn't think are there.
Well, I think you answered the question perfectly. I think that answers my question, right? That's a set of things which, you could have, especially design capability and quality control over the rest of the market. So very interesting. Talk a little bit about, so let me segue just a little bit to this YouTube documentary, which is about Amazon's market power, and you're featured pretty prominently. Are you a producer of that? Are you involved in that, or are you just the talent in the video?
I think I'm not sure what to call me, but I'm in it, and then I personally bought the rights to the German documentary, and then I paid to have it translated into English and then distribute it. And
got it. So you're the US distributor.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that, because I saw you, I think on your personal webpage, you have this thing about things my mom wants you to know about me, like my accomplishments. And one of them is, I think, about being responsible.
Yeah, I may have written that I produced it. I don't know. Is that it depends, right? Like it was an undertaking, I assure you. Whether
no worries.
I was gonna lie on your website a little bit,
No. I wasn't going that way. I was just saying, like, I realized from that you weren't just the guy profiled in the documentary. You actually had a role in getting it distributed and making the English. Yeah. So anyway, I really enjoyed it. I think it's super informative. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. Cool. Anybody who wants to understand, like, obviously everybody's an Amazon a consumer using Amazon, but very few people really understand what's happening behind the scenes for the merchants, who gets featured in that buy box on the right hand side. Mm-hmm. It's either in that video or somewhere else. You said, like, to be an Amazon seller today, you have to be able to do like multivariate optimization of all kinds of different factors. Like, should I pay a little extra to have the Amazon truck come and get my stuff? Or should I save that? What does it do to my being featured as the top result? Mm-hmm. If I do this or I don't do this. So talk about high IQ stuff. Like, I think to figure out how to optimize that Amazon slot machine and make money off of it seems like a very cognitively demanding task.
Oh my God, it absolutely is. It's Sunday night. I have like the Sunday night scaries for Monday morning. Yeah, I mean, like, so Amazon, when you order something from Amazon, it's usually shipped from an Amazon warehouse. And we, as sellers on Amazon, are not selling to Amazon. We are deciding how much inventory we want to store at Amazon. And just for this little narrow part of the business. And there are all sorts of things like reviews and advertising and deals and obviously making the products and all this stuff. We can just talk about forecasting inventory to Amazon. You have to think about the seasonality of your business with toys. You have storage fees at Amazon that go up and down over the course of the year. You have long-term storage fees if your products are at Amazon for too long. You have low inventory fees if Amazon decides that you don't have enough inventory at their warehouses in order to maintain their Prime 2-day, and I can explain how that works. You have placement fees because you can't ship all your inventory to a single Amazon warehouse. You have the option of shipping it to 5 different warehouses, 3 different warehouses, or 1 different warehouse. You can ship it yourself. You can ship it using an Amazon truck. You can ship it FedEx in like lots of little boxes. You can ship it on pallets. You can ship it in a full truckload. There's like literally so many different permutations, combinations, variables, whatever, that goes into minimizing the cost of getting your inventory to Amazon and at the same time making sure that you have enough. It's an extremely complex
optimization
problem. Optimization, sure.
Yeah, insane. Okay, so in the documentary, I think you go into a little bit of the detail for the Brain Flakes product that you make. And so for the audience, it's a plastic toy that you can construct things out of and kind of build your spatial reasoning ability maybe and your creativity. I think you sell it for a little bit less than $20. And I think in the video, Amazon takes half of that money. So when I buy a box of Brain Flakes from you, and let's suppose I pay you close to $20, Amazon's taking close to 10. And I think you're taking close to 4, and the rest. What's the rest going to? The factory or something? Or maybe you can break that down.
Yeah, we have to pay for the product as well. I don't remember the exact statistic, but I think Amazon takes over 50% of the retail price. And you have to remember that we are selling on Amazon. Okay, so Amazon is just like our vendor. We're just paying Amazon to ship it out, store it, and find you the customer, and we're not selling to Amazon, right? So like if you go to a store, you'd be like, hey, can you buy this? And if it sells, then that's good. The store will reorder. If it doesn't sell, that's bad but it's not my problem anymore because I already sold it. It's not like that at all. We're selling on Amazon, and yeah, they take even a larger percentage today than at the time of filming that video. It's wild.
Right. So I think the logic in the video is something like this. Amazon has so much market power now that someone in your line of business cannot afford to not be on Amazon. You must be on Amazon. But because you must be on Amazon, they can nickel and dime you to death on every little fee, every little service, using the Prime truck, whatever it is. And gradually, someone then quoted Bezos is saying that Molson's margin is my profit growth to go after, because the more I can take from him without fully driving him off the platform, I should do that. That's what we're going to do. It seems like that's the direction Amazon is heading. Did I get the right impression?
Yeah, you nailed it. So his famous quote is, "Your margin is my opportunity."
Yes.
So there's and that's not just like something he says or something that he said. It's like something that they have actually manifested. So there's like a very long, complicated supply chain between our factories to you, the consumer. And along that chain, right, like the shipping company that moves it from China to the US, the warehouses, the fulfillment centers, the shipping, all these different things, they actually do all of it. So like if I make a container's worth of Brain Flakes, the product in China, like I can put it on an Amazon, kind of in an Amazon container, and then it gets moved by an Amazon truck, and then it goes into Amazon cold storage, and then it goes on another Amazon truck to an Amazon fulfillment center. And then it gets unpacked and whatever by Amazon labor. And then another Amazon truck, like the Amazon Prime trucks that you see in your neighborhood, then delivers it to you. So like each one of those at one time was a different company. And it was just like, oh, that margin, now that's Amazon's opportunity. That margin, that's Amazon's opportunity. And that's just like the supply chain side of it, right? And there's also the whole software side of it, from like advertising to, emailing and all this different software that goes on. And they kind of like grab that as well. Like there was a time when like Google had ads, and that's where you search, but now Amazon has ads. So that was another like margin that they just kind of like sucked up. So it's amazing what they've done.
Yeah, I mean, as a company, it's amazing, all these capabilities, building out all those capabilities. The problem becomes when either you, the merchant, or me, the consumer, don't have an alternative, because then they could just ratchet everything up, right? And the question is, have we reached that point where they're so market dominant that they can kind of exploit these capabilities they've built? They're not forcing to compete those capabilities against other things, but they're really just able to force prices on people like you. Yeah, have we reached that point?
I mean, I think that's actually what they're doing. I mean, they are just shoving so many fees. So basically what happens is like sellers we have a brand, but in general, sellers on Amazon are in commoditized competition, and in commoditized competition, like profit margins in theory eventually go to zero. So every time like Amazon raises their fees, like the sellers just basically raise their prices. And so you as the consumer pay more and Amazon takes more money. And really, what's the safety valve on that? Like, I don't know. Off the top of my head, Amazon is like something like 80 times Walmart sales. I don't know, for us. So we sell on Walmart.com too, not just Amazon.
Yeah.
But so what's the safety valve, the pressure valve on this ever increasing price increases that are happening on Amazon? It's like Temu and stuff like that. And actually, if you look at it, like oftentimes you can find the same product on Temu for like a tenth of the price that you find out. It really happens, and it takes like 7 days instead of 1 or 2.
Yeah, I have to admit that I'm a cheapskate. I claim to possibly have the world record for being the most miserly, relatively high net worth person in the world. So I actually have shopped, partially as an experiment, but partially because I'm a cheapskate. But I have shopped on AliExpress.
Yeah.
Shopped on Temu. And you're right. You can buy stuff which is like literally 1/10 the Amazon price. And it could be like earbuds. It could be shoes. It could be athletic gear.
And sometimes it's the same thing. Like it's actually the same thing.
It's literally the same thing. So the people who are enthusiasts of AliExpress or Temu will just say like, look, the same shit it's all made in China. It's going to come through some distribution process. If you buy it through Amazon, you're going to pay 10x or something. But you get it in 2 days instead of 7 days, right? That's the difference, right? So
yeah, but like, where's that money going, right? Because Temu is shipping all that by air, and like shipping things by air is expensive. So where's the money going? It's going to Amazon.
Yeah. Yep. So one safety valve, as you pointed out, could be competition from AliExpress, TikTok, Temu. I'm talking specifically about America. Another safety valve is some federal regulation where they say, like, wait a minute, you guys are a monopoly now. We better have some protections put in place. And then there's also, I do notice, like for some, like I just ordered some protein powder from Amazon. It's basically the same price as if I walked into Walmart or Costco and bought it. It's more or less the same price. So there is some, they can't go too high above that price. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But what do you think is likely to happen in the next 5 years?
That's like a complex human system. And I've learned the hard way that you don't try to predict complex human systems. This is like as harder than predicting like what market price will be in 6 months, which is also a complex human system. What do I think is going to happen? I sincerely have no idea. But the thing that I believe, that going back to the beginning of this call, like contrarian and right, I think that Amazon is kind of like at peak Amazon right now, in the sense that it is facing more competition than it has ever faced before in its time. And the people who are running it are not Bezos. They're amazingly talented, but they're not Bezos. And Bezos is potentially one of the best entrepreneurs of all time. And they're also facing, to your point, like scrutiny from government. And so it's just like hard for me to wrap my head around the idea that they can just continually dominate. Maybe if they some sort of like Hail Mary pass would need to be executed where they're like, okay, somehow manage to like pass legislation that makes them not a monopoly, not an overpowerful company. And I'm not taking a position on that issue right now in this call, but somehow makes it difficult for Temu and TikTok, two Chinese companies, because those are the foremost competitors, and also Shopify in a sense. Some sort of legislation like that, and like restricts their competition, and at the same time they don't face government scrutiny, and they just continue along as they have been over the past 10 years. That's what would need to happen for them to my mind, for them to not be at peak Amazon.
Now, did I see you tweet out at some point recently that you were done with Amazon, or were you retweeting some other seller on Amazon saying that? I forgot.
No, I mean, we can't be done with Amazon because it's 88% of our business.
Yeah.
It used to be like 99% of our business. And after many years of work, we got all the way down to 88% of our business. We can't be done because that would just kill the company overnight. But I don't want to invest in this platform anymore for not only the reasons I just gave. It is my belief that it's peak Amazon, but also because like I've just had enough of the complexity that they're constantly introducing into the system, and also the additional costs that constantly require us to raise prices. It's just like at a certain point, you're just like, you know what, like I've just had enough. Like there has to be some other better way for us to make money.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. These monopolies, they're very powerful. I mean, Bezos bought the Washington Post for a reason, right? So, I think he's probably got plenty of lobbyists and people defending his interests in DC. So,
it's a complex human game. Like it is just like, it's really unpredictable in terms of what can happen. It can go any which way. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Hard to predict. So, what's in the future for Molson? Are you branching out into any other areas, or are you going to become the #1 plush toy seller in America? What's the 10-year plan for you?
So, great question. So yeah, we're continuously improving our business, which is important for me and also for my employees. And I want to make continuously better products. And, we're an educational toy company. And so we got to keep those kids educated, especially when the data, right, actually shows that they're increasingly less and less educated. And I think you as a professor get to see that firsthand, like the incoming classes are. So that's one thing. Another thing is I'm just like a little crazy, and I've got like some interesting business things up my sleeve. I'd love to be able to compete with Amazon in a bunch of different ways. And so I'm going to try to pull some of those things off. But one of them isn't quite ready to talk about. And then the other one, hopefully this month, we'll be able to launch a website where it'll give you a real sense of just how much cheaper things can be when Amazon is not kind of taking their cut.
Yeah. If you're an American entrepreneur and you're thinking like, wow, I have an idea of a product that would just kill it, but I'm probably going to have to go to China to get it made and then figure out the whole supply chain thing. Is Molson the #1 guy? Like if they could get an hour of your time, you could basically like accelerate their progress like tremendously.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to spend an hour with anyone. Sorry.
Okay.
But
I didn't say you do it for free.
I don't know. I'm really busy. Look, like, I would help, but I'm not even sure if like sometimes things can't be accelerated. If you ever hear that that expression, like after 10 years, I was an overnight success.
Yep.
There's some element of truth to that irrespective of how intelligent you are, like you just kind of need to make a bunch of mistakes and whatever. So like, yes, if you could talk to me for an hour, I'd be able to help you a lot. But the journey is just like part of the fun. So forget me and, go read some books, like read Shoe Dog or something like that by Phil Knight for Nike. That's better than an hour with me. And you'll learn so many cool things. Read some books, read some autobiographies about business people, inventors, whatever, and then just go to China. And just like, it depends on what stage you are in your life. If you have a family, that's obviously more complicated. But if you're young and you don't have a family yet, right? Just go to China and go just sleep on the factory floor until you figure it out. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're probably not going to make it. And that's okay too. Go get a job then.
That's awesome advice. I love that advice. Coming back to China, not specifically talking to entrepreneurs now, but just talking to the average American who might say like, I read all this stuff in the papers and my cousin in London just bought a $10,000 electric car made by BYD, but I can't buy it in the US. I think the average person could gain a lot just by understanding, reality on the ground in China, right? So I would recommend everybody, if you're going to take a vacation, go there and just see it. It's actually pretty cheap to travel. It's still relatively cheap to travel around to China. So why not? Why wouldn't you go there?
I agree wholeheartedly. It's wonderful. It's cool. It'll blow your mind. It'll open your mind up to a whole new culture. You have great food, ride high speed rails. Like you're not going to get robbed. There's like no crime there.
Yeah.
It's just super cheap.
Yeah.
Like just go. I was so surprised to learn. I like went to China, came back, and then it was like, wait, there's a State Department warning saying you can't go. Like,
yeah, it's totally bizarre right now. That who knows where that came from? Well, it's just all politics. But actually, I think you told a funny story that the first time you went to China, your relatives were worried they were going to harvest your organs or something.
Yes, that is true. My mom was like, do not go. I don't care what that rich person said. You are going to come back without a kidney. Like it is not safe. And back then, like that was like, it was pretty unlike. I didn't lose any kidneys in China, but back in 2011 on the North Korean border, like I had some weird stuff that, I got shaken down by corrupt cops. I had a lot of bad experiences up there, bad experiences that were fantastic actually in retrospect, because it's like a great story, powerful lessons. It was horrible in the moment, but like since I survived, I'm really happy I went through it.
I'll tell you a funny story. One of my first startup, this is way back in the early internet days. One of the investors was the CIA venture fund called In-Q-Tel. Still exists, In-Q-Tel, but this is the early days for In-Q-Tel. And I think they invested $1 million in my first startup and also bought a bunch of software, encryption software from us. And so I did a bunch of work with them way back then. And for a long period of time, I was regularly consulted by both FBI and CIA on national security matters related to China, not just China, but including China. And I remember these guys would sometimes even come to Michigan from Washington to meet with me, right? It wasn't just like me going there. Like sometimes they would actually come here. And so I remember meeting with these guys and thinking I'd like to, I'll tell them what I think is going on in China biotech or China genomics or, compute or whatever. And here's the funny thing is like a lot of these guys who came to talk to me, like literal CIA agents, CIA analysts or FBI national security people, I would say like, have you ever been to China? Like they would say something like totally bizarre, like, oh, they're going to harvest they're going to harvest your organs there.
Oh no.
Right. And I'd be like, have you ever been to China? And then I remember one agent saying to me, I don't think I'll ever go to China. And I was like, you're the guy in our government who's trying to figure out national security issues with China. And you just told me, I don't think I'll ever go to China. I was just like, wow, we are in trouble.
Are you telling me that when my mom sent me the text message saying that they were going to harvest my organs, is she CIA? All right. That's wild. That's really interesting that that's interesting. That's what is that? It's like getting high off your own supply in a way.
If you read the think tank output like position policy papers and reports and stuff within like, say within Washington, it's like a little bubble chamber. It's like its own filter bubble. Like they just talk to each other and very few of them have actual experience. Like you who have actually dealt with Chinese companies and warehouses and factories know 100 times more than some of these agents, some of these analysts know about the real China, right? So it's scary.
I've dealt with some very talented, high-powered government employees who are like super smart, particularly in law. Like oftentimes, like we have this the lawyers who work for the FTC are not like DMV employees or anything like that. They were like really, really, really smart. Sometimes even smarter than the private counsel for corporations and stuff like that. But like, do you think that they sincerely believed that? Because there's also like an element of like conforming to the prevailing viewpoint. Like, is it possible that they just like said like, oh, I would never go to China because it's dangerous and that's what you just say, you know what I mean? Because you never really know when someone's just conforming versus.
Yeah. I think for example, when your mom warned you, she was sincerely worried about her beloved son losing his kidney. She was sincerely concerned. Yeah. She might have been miscalibrated on the actual risks, but she was sincere. That is my judgment of at least some of these, national security people that I met with, is they're genuinely, sincerely misinformed and actually like ignorant because they'd never gone there. So
that's really bad. Like we need to like fix that because like you don't want like the number one and number two country to like think that the other person is crazy or evil or something like that. There needs to be some sort of like cultural exchange there because both sides can learn from each other. And like the CIA guys who are monitoring China, I don't know, maybe if you're CIA and you go to China, you just get like killed. I don't know. Maybe that's why they don't go, but there's something needs to fix that.
I think if you're on the operations side, maybe the analysts too, also there would be reasons why they wouldn't go there. But, the attitude that they had and, which was, I think, sincere was still very alarming to me. So, I mean, they could go to Taiwan. I mean, I think I even said to them like, well, if you don't want to go to China, but maybe you should just at least go to Taiwan because then you'll at least get some exposure to Chinese-like culture. And also like Taiwan is going to play a big role in what's going to happen. Right. And none of them were going to go there either.
You gotta break them in slowly. You're like, hey, I'm going to bring you to PF Chang's. And
exactly.
I'm going to go to Chinatown next.
We're going to start.
They cook cats and dogs there.
We're going to start with Panda Express.
Panda Express. We're not even going to go to PF Chang's. We got to go real slow.
Yeah.
That's wild. I can't believe that.
Crazy. So how often do you go?
To Panda Express or China?
Oh, China.
Well, I didn't go throughout the whole pandemic because like there was at one time I think it got all the way up to 3 weeks. There was a 3-week quarantine. So like if you went to China, you needed to be in a hotel for 3 weeks, and so that didn't work for me. So because you go for a week and then it takes 3 weeks or whatever. And
looking forward,
I didn't go.
Like looking forward, assuming no.
Well, how often will I go?
Yeah.
Well, it's a really interesting question. I mean, like, I don't know what the current State Department warning is. If the State Department warning goes from like 2 to 3, like maybe I won't go that often because it creates problems. And I don't know. It's still like a really long flight. But it's an Asian century. So I think I'll go quite often, and I learned so much, and it felt like there were so many business opportunities, and there was a time when like, the Chinese could just like copy whatever was working in America and be successful. And now maybe the reverse is true. Go to China. If you're a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, go copy what the Chinese are doing in terms of tech. Bring it here. That's an opportunity. So I don't know. Maybe once a year, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to do is go there at least with that frequency, just to see what's happening there.
What do you do? What is that? Like, I don't run with that crowd with these like high powered civilized people. That's not me. I'm like out in the factories. Like, what do you do when you go to China?
Well, see, I would love to see some factories, but I might be there for a physics conference or something. I might be there to meet with some people in genomics or AI. I might be there meeting with some venture capital people or other startup people. Or my wife's also an academic, so she might be there for some conference and I'm just tagging along at her conference or something like that. So could be anything. But I think the coolest thing would be to actually see, like if I could go there and visit a BYD factory and see what it's doing. I interviewed this guy, Ogan is his name. Is it Tyler Ogan? I'm sorry if I'm getting your name wrong, but he runs a hedge fund called Snowball Capital, and they invest largely in Chinese companies. And he moved his whole fund to Shenzhen. And a big part of what they do is they go and they will always visit the factory or the labs or whatever of the companies that they're thinking of investing in. And I found that really fascinating. I'd love to tag along with him.
Yeah, I recommend doing that, regardless of whether it's venture capital or you manufacture products in China. Have you seen the academic output and the innovations coming out of China improve or increase?
Yeah. This is something that I'm always telling people, because people's if they're not in the space, their perceptions tend to lag. Okay, so like if you go back 10 years ago, any top physics or engineering or STEM department, there'd be a lot of Chinese graduate students, right, who are pretty good. And a lot of them stay here. Most of them would try to stay here back then.
Right.
Now what you find is that it's very, very common for them to want to go back. The country has spent a lot of money upgrading the university labs, their infrastructure, their capabilities. And so now when I visit there, if I go to a conference there, the people I meet there are pretty much up to date. Like they understand the research frontier and they're not behind. Like 10, 20 years ago, you would go there and even at a top university, like you might only meet a fraction of the research labs or the people there were at the frontier, and the other people were kind of like 5, 10 years behind. So, but that gap is now pretty much closed. And so the new graduates who come from Chinese universities, maybe they stayed there and did a PhD. This would never have been the case 10, 15 years ago, but they did their PhD in China, but you meet them and they're totally up to date on everything. So that's a big delta over the last 10 years that most people are not aware. Most people think they're still copying, but in fact, they're not actually just copying anymore.
Yeah, and you speak Chinese, right?
I'm not completely fluent. I'm like your typical ABC. My Chinese is good enough that like I can get by very easily, like, just like ordering food or getting in a taxi cab. But if I try to talk like in a sophisticated way about the economy or physics or something, no, my Chinese is not anywhere near that good. So,
yeah, I feel you. I'm around there. It depends on the topic, right? Like I know a lot of words for stuffed animals. Like I know a lot of Chinese words for various animals. What about, so that's interesting that they're at that's like a huge misconception in the United States. In the United States, as you said, it's just like copy. The misconception is that people in China are just copying, and that's the downfall of like Chinese academics or cognitive capacity, whatever you want to say. Are they innovating? I imagine that they're innovating too. They're not just at the research frontier, or has that lagged a little bit?
No, well, I think there are a lot of nuances here. Like I think in these East Asian societies, it's less likely for a young person to like kind of like defy their elders and be really like an outlier in terms of their opinion. So in that way, like that a certain kind of innovation and originality and creativity is a little bit suppressed by the culture. I think that's true. But on the other hand, like a lot of things, first of all, that would be much less true at a startup. So like startups are like very kind of Western in their culture, I think. Okay. But also like for a lot of things that they do, which is like, okay, we know we want to improve the efficiency of this battery, right? And then you're not a maverick to like be just trying different things to try to improve the efficiency of that battery. And in that kind of work, they're not, I don't think, worse than Westerners. They're just as good as Westerners. It's the like totally out of the box 0 to 1 Albert Einstein stuff, maybe that for cultural reasons, they're maybe not quite as good at that. I think even that, like some people would, some Chinese people would debate me about whether that's really true. But I can see there's an argument in favor of that. But for optimizations of existing things that people already know are valuable and good, I don't think they're behind anybody.
So here's how I think about it. One, like go look at like US patents, right? So I don't know. I'm not in the academia space at all. So I can't talk about that. But I can talk about like business and I can talk about patents, right? Because I know about that. There are a lot of Chinese names on those patents. So that's one. Two, in terms of innovation, the way I think about it is incentives, right? So at least in the business arena, there wasn't an incentive to innovate in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s in China. Why would you innovate when you could just start a shoe factory?
Yep, exactly.
And like there was a blueprint for a shoe factory and you can be a shoe factory billionaire. What's the incentive? But now the game has changed. And all the shoe factories have already been started and you don't have dirt cheap labor anymore. And like Vietnam is like killing you on shoes. Or, Vietnam is doing quite well on shoes with superior labor and they have a good supply chain for shoes. So you need to innovate. And I don't know, like, I think they can pull it off. It was interesting that you said that like 0 to 1, maybe they're not able to do as well, but like the light bulb, if I remember the story correctly, I don't know what his 0 to 1 moment was, but at some point Thomas Edison was like, hey, he like found some guy and he was like, hey dude, like I want you to just go through 10,000 different materials for the filament until you arrive at the one that like when you run current through it, it lights up. Right. And it was like tungsten or something like that. And so I don't know what are the innovations, because we think of the light bulb as like 0 to 1, right? But you could almost break it down and to kind of make it a way more formulaic that like is better suited to the Chinese style of innovation. So I'm just curious in terms of like what you think, what is a 0 to 1 innovation?
So I think that in terms of the historical fables that we've been told, oftentimes, like with the light bulb, my understanding is exactly what you said, that there was a huge amount of trial and error and kind of what you would associate with Chinese grinding trial and error to like improve the battery or improve the process to make this material or something. And that is the true story of the light bulb. But the way it gets told in American schools is like, oh, the light bulb went off 0 to 1, right?
Like a light bulb.
Yeah. So that's maybe not a great example, but I think one of the things and this is not really that relevant for business. It's a little more for very highfalutin subjects like theoretical physics. Like someone like Albert Einstein, who really just was his own man. He didn't listen to anybody. He didn't listen to the older physicists. And he just went off on his own and worked for years on stuff and then came back with these radical ideas. It could be, I'm saying hypothetically, it could be that the Confucian culture isn't really as is a little bit more negative about that kind of behavior than, because Westerners our culture is more individualistic. And it's like the individual could be first and the family comes second and all this other stuff. In China, it could be more like, oh, the family comes first and your individuality comes second, or the good of the research group or the physics department comes before you, right? And so like that, I can see an argument in that direction. It's tricky though. It's hard to know how this is going to play out in the future.
Right. And that goes back to, I have that a little bit in mind when I say that the next Elon Musk may not be Chinese, but might be living in Shenzhen.
Yeah.
For that reason.
I do think that from what I've seen from the younger generation of Chinese entrepreneurs and business people, is they are risk takers. They will totally everyone else told me this is impossible, this is stupid, but I went and did it. Jack Ma is even like that. Jack Ma was just like out there. He's 0 to 1, very much so. He's like the most 0 to 1 Chinese entrepreneur I can think of. Yeah. So I think and the BYD guy, the BYD founder, there are guys who are just like, look, this is my vision. No, you're not going to, founder of TSMC, although he's actually in Taiwan, not China, but same culture. But, those guys were just like, I know what I'm doing. I may have to go 10 years in the wilderness by myself, but I'm going to do it. And I don't really see a lack of that on the business side. Maybe on the scientific side, but I don't see that on the business side in China.
Are you Taiwanese? Because your last name is HSU, not XU.
I'll tell you I don't want to keep you too long, Wilson, but I want to tell you this story. So I have this weird spelling, this Anglicization of my Chinese name, which today would be XU. Right. People always say, "Oh, are you Taiwanese because your name is spelled HSU?" It's because my dad left China before the fucking communists took over. So he left before 1948, and at that time they were still using the old system, the same system that they still use in Taiwan for translating the name to English, to give the English spelling. So, because that whole new system was put in by the communists, actually. So
Opinion.
XU, yeah. So
right.
So that's why. So my dad actually didn't pass through Taiwan, but my mom's family, not only are they Taiwanese, they were part of this diaspora in 1949 where the KMT, my grandfather was a KMT general, and right. Their family is related to Chiang Kai-shek by marriage. They're the ones who came into Taiwan and basically took it over, killed a lot of people, a lot of political dissidents and stuff who resisted the KMT taking over Taiwan were killed. This is all the history of it that nobody knows, right? So now we talk about Taiwan as this amazing democracy, such. But it was a dictatorship. From my extended family, they were the dictators of Taiwan for a long time until fairly recently when they started having actual elections. So all these East Asian countries that modernized went through an authoritarian phase. South Korea went through it, Japan went through it, Taiwan went through it, and
arguably not Singapore, but yeah.
Well, but some people would say Lee Kuan Yew was an authoritarian figure.
I know some people would say, but it's not at the same level of like Chiang Kai-shek or like Park in South Korea, right?
That's a different story because that was really a British colony. So, but
yeah, I know. I'm just being whatever.
The point I'm trying to make is like it could be the case that like this phase of very authoritarian Xi-like stuff, it's going to go away eventually, and at that point, you can say like, oh, China will just be like Taiwan or South Korea. They had a strong man in place for a long time, but they eventually started having elections and stuff like that. Could happen.
Right. Well, yeah. So many questions about that. But China, because of its size, can never, like people, right. So what are like the three things that people in the US say that as reasons for why China will never be like the hegemonic power? Demographic collapse.
Yeah.
They can't innovate. So we didn't address the demographic collapse, but I think we addressed the can't innovate thing, which is mostly nonsense. And then the third thing, man, I keep doing this. The third thing is that Japan was like the next hegemonic power, and look at them now, right? But like 110 million, 120 million people, it's not 1.4 billion people. Yeah. And then like, if you look at Japan, like go look at like maps of US bases. It's like, it's all over Japan. There are no US bases in China. So it's just like a whole different thing. And so you should not be extrapolating from that example. And China is going to be a force in this century. And that's a foregone conclusion. And that will happen like before the alleged, right? Because we have fertility problems all over the globe, except for Africa, which has a whole different set of problems. But China will be a force before the supposed demographic collapse happens.
Yeah. The way I like to say it is that the people who will enter the labor force in China over the next 20 years are already born. So, so we know how many of them there are. So if you just do little calculations to say like, well, it turns out, this is again, shocking for most people, that if you go back 20 years ago, only a few percent, maybe 5% of all high school grads in China could go to college. That was 20 years ago. Now over 50% go to college, and twice as many of them major in STEM as the college students in the US. So you can actually just sit down and do some simple calculations. They're like, how many biologists are they going to pump out? How many engineers are they going to pump out? How many computer scientists are they going to pump out? And when you do these numbers, you get for the next 20 years, and given the existing demographics, you get numbers like where you're really not comparing China to the US because it's almost an order of magnitude difference. You're comparing China to ROW, rest of world. Yes. So it's all like number of engineers produced here is comparable to ROW, right, for the next 20 years. So it's almost impossible that unless they have some kind of social collapse or we nuke them. it's impossible that they're not going to make a lot of progress, right? So, because the whole makeup of society is going to be different in 20 years. The fraction of people that are highly educated is going to be enormously different than what they currently have right now. So,
yeah, I agree completely. And, like they have to take care of their old, but like, if they don't do a great job of that and they just, this is horrible. Like, I'm not advocating for this in any way in any country. I don't want anyone to not take care of their old people, but if they like kind of just don't, and you just put them in hospice care, kind of like we do in this country, like it kind of works out. And as you said, even if they experience a demographic collapse, they still have like way more people and still are having more births than we are without our quote unquote demographic collapse. So the idea that China will be the next Japan, it just doesn't compute in any way for me.
The Japanese who are retiring now and the US boomers that are retiring now, they're among the most like lucky generations in terms of material wealth that they've experienced. So they're expecting, people who are retiring now are expecting to go on cruises around the Mediterranean during their retirement.
Right.
People that are going to retire in China over the next 20 years were dirt poor when they were growing up. And they really had to, eat bitterness, and they worked in factories. They don't have the same expectations that people in the West have. If they can just have a relaxed lifestyle, living close to their extended family and enough to eat, most of these people are actually pretty happy, right? The bulk of, I'm not talking about the elites, but the bulk of people who worked on farms and factories and did the backbreaking work of building China, over the last, 20, 30 years, they don't have these super high expectations. So it's kind of a different situation with how expensive their, burden for elderly care is going to be. I think it's qualitatively different than what we're used to here.
That's a great point. There's another way in which these comparisons are not apples to apples. If you just go Japan versus the US, right? So like, I don't know what the median age in Japan is. It's been like 5 to 7 years higher than it is in the United States.
Yeah.
More. Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe more. Let's call it 7-10 years higher. Right. But like, if you look at it from like a biological, like health age, your two bodies might be more or less the same age, because there are no 350-pound diabetic people in Japan outside of like the retired sumo wrestlers. Maybe there's like 4, but that's like quite common in the United States. And so like, the whole demographic collapse narrative from so many, and China's like life expectancy and health span and all that stuff, that's like trending rapidly, as we in the United States are like, actually our life expectancy is falling.
Yeah. Their life expectancy now exceeds ours, actually, slightly. So
that's brutal.